and an empty packet of crisps. And so I always like to run by my own material with my wife, Helen, and the kids, and she said, I don't mind you using the story, but can you change the empty packet of crisps to an apple core? Because at least that makes me look like I've been a bit more healthy. So anyway, it was a bag of crisps, really. But yeah, but for me, it's interesting, Sally, you said about the beach ball. For me, I use the question on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10's death. Where is that apple core stroke empty bag of crisps? But hey ho. But it's interesting what you've used to help you in that situation.
I had to own up to buying 2 beach balls since I read the book.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Not for me. I've given them to people. So it's become my sort of go-to present for sort of people who I think might benefit from sort of realising you can see things differently.
Wow.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it really is.
Paul's going to go out and get shares in a beach ball company now, aren't you, Paul?
Well, actually, I wish you Paul, because you can't get, I know the one that you've used when you give your talks, because I've seen you talk about this as well, the one with all the colours around the round, which is the best one, and at the moment you can't get those. You can only get ones with sort of 3 white segments and then 3 individual colour segments.
Oh, okay. I know they've been difficult. I don't know how many we've got, but I know that finding 6 segments isn't always useful. But there is a company in Liverpool, they're a housing association, South Liverpool Homes, and they were like the Times #1 not-for-profit organisation to work for a few years ago. And the chief exec, after she heard me speak, she bought each and they're hung in the office. And when the Times went to visit her to take some photos, they asked the question, out of interest, how come you've got these beach balls hanging around from the ceiling? But she said, I just want it as a constant visual reminder for the staff. Yeah.
No, they're a great visual reminder.
Mm.
Hey, fantastic. I love that. So has anybody else got anything that they'd like to ask Paul or share with Paul?
I just wanted to share that, over the last few weeks, it's the people's attitude is the big thing that has really stood out for me, because as most of you know, I work for the Entrepreneurs Forum, and part of my job has been to ring members and do that account management piece. And Sally, I've spoken to Sally, she's on my list. But it's amazing how you can have people, as you say, it's that, again, that analogy you've just given, Paul, that everyone's in the same storm, but everyone's in a different boat. And it's amazing how you can have people whose businesses can be in exactly the same situation as Sally is, with, can't open, not trading, but different people approach it in completely different ways. Some people have gone really Eeyore and, everything, it's that victim mentality, isn't it? Oh, everything goes wrong for me. I've just done this and I can't believe this has happened. And they're really sort of down on themselves and really negative. But then the people who, when you come off the phone, you think, well, they're a ray of sunshine, because they really just, when you talk to them, you hear the positivity and well, it's just another challenge, and there's always a challenge in business, and I've really enjoyed having to pivot what I'm doing, and it's just the difference in different people. But then I've seen, because of the cycle over that 10 weeks, it's been interesting to go back to some of the people who I spoke to 10 weeks ago, and they've actually made that change in their own thinking themselves and seen that develop. So some people who, 1 or 2 days into lockdown were really stood on the precipice of the cliff, and now they're full of vim and vigor and they're taking on the world, and it's nice to see that arc in their journey just as an observer, because I always think I'm quite a positive person myself, and I always look for the positive in everything, and it's all to do with your attitude and how you approach things. But it's interesting to see that in other people. But you do get from time to time people who do get into that victim, oh, everything goes wrong for me, and actually it doesn't. It's just the way they view it.
Yeah, well, I found that kind of in the last couple of weeks as well, Karen, because a bit like you, everybody 10 weeks ago was very much like, oh, I don't know, let's see what happens, and a bit, like you say, an Eeyore. I love that. But when I was reading S.U.M.O, and I was showing Paul earlier, I've got loads of little tabs down each thing because I'm a little bit OCD.
Gold star for you.
Thank you. But I went back through my tabs and just made sure what I actually had tabbed up, and most of that is how to deal with like the martyr syndrome and things like that. And I think in the last 2 weeks, everybody's kind of gone, okay, there's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and now they're dealing with it in a slightly different way, so that they've kind of given their heads a shake and they're moving forward with stuff. But I found, because I'm quite I think I'm a bit like you, Karen, quite a positive person, but I'm very rational. I can stand on, Jess is nodding at me there. I can stand on both sides of the camp, and I enjoy that. But what I find very difficult is dealing with that victim mentality and that struggle. And that's what I found S.U.M.O most helpful for. But yeah, I think I'm a lot like you, Karen, for that sense, and seeing what happens next.
Yeah, and the whinges, I can't cope with people who just unproductive complaining is one of my absolute. I love the way Sally's nodding. But people who just whinge and whinge and whinge and just don't do anything to about it, you know what I mean? There's no point in sitting and whinging and complaining about the same thing that you've whinged and complained about 2 hours yesterday and 2 hours the day before and 2 hours. You know, I love the bit. I think there's a bit in the book about some people who complain about their jobs. And I've always just been one of those people. I'm quite frank. It probably doesn't get me anywhere. But when people are whinging and want to say, if you dislike it that much, just get a different one. Like, you know, if it's making you miserable, just do something different. Nobody makes you have to come to work and do this job. There are, even in the midst of a recession, you can change jobs. I've done it many times. I think I've had about 14, 15 different jobs. It is possible to do it. And it really annoys me that people will sit and piss and moan, for want of a better word, about the situation and not actually be proactive and do anything about it. If you've got a hideous boss and they're not going to change, go and work for yourself, go and do something, go and find a job somewhere else, because the one thing that isn't going to happen is that boss isn't going to change, because bosses don't, you know, people don't change. So if you can't deal with the fact that they're a micromanager and they're not very nice to work for, well, take yourself out of that situation and go and do something that makes you happier. You know, I can't get into that whole, oh, well, it's all right just to moan about it for 2 hours every day. But,
so on that, Paul, what would your advice be? I mean, rather than obviously take Liv's approach to send people beach balls, which I think is great, and I love that. But if we've got people that are in our lives that are still maybe in that kind of hippo time and really, I mean, we can control our own emotions, absolutely, and our attitudes and all that. But what would be your advice in regards to those people that still aren't doing that Karen's talking about?
Well, one of the things, I mean, and it is, you know, obviously S.U.M.O, shut up, move on, but it can also stand for stop, understand, move on. And I think there's that sense of, ultimately, I can give no advice to anybody that says, if you do this, then that person will change, because ultimately it's up to them. I think one of the things we need to just 2 or 3 things to think about. One is just how important self-awareness is. And that's something which I do mention briefly at the beginning of the book, and hopefully reveal our sense of self-awareness. Now, there's something which in the winter months we call SADS, S-A-D-S, seasonal, whatever there is, disorder syndrome. But in one of my other books, How to Succeed with People, I talk about the fact that some people suffer from SADS, self-awareness deficiency syndrome. And there's this lack of awareness about themselves and how their own attitude, their own mindset actually does influence their own, you know, their own lives. Life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I think one of the things just to stop and understand is that some people aren't enlightened. They aren't self-aware. They live by a different formula, E equals O. In other words, the outcomes I get are because of the event. It's nothing to do with my response. I can't do anything. And what else influences people's responses to things? I mentioned briefly in the book about Pavlov's dog, and that the dog becomes conditioned. And sometimes we need to be aware that some people have grown up in an environment or had people around them where have influenced their conditioning. And it's like, you know, same shit, different day, you know, once lockdown's over, nothing's going to change. And there's this sense of fatalism, this very fatalistic approach. And there's also a sense sometimes of entitlement, which is, well, you know, I'm just not lucky because no one helped support me. So I think when we say, how do we help those people? I think the first thing to do is just to understand the environment that they've been maybe grown up in, that they've been conditioned. And there is, you know, if the light bulb, you know, there's an old joke, which, do I mention it in the book? I can't remember. I think it's in another book. And it's don't laugh because it ain't funny, but it makes a point. So I trained to be a probation officer. And when I graduated, I decided I don't want to be a probation officer. So people are interviewing me and going, oh, so you've got a degree, but you've also trained to be a probation officer. Why don't you want to become one? And I went, how many probation officers does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer's one, but only if the light bulb wants to change. And I think what we need to appreciate is some people don't want to change. They're actually very happy in their little pool of self-pity, in their comfort zone. And in a sense, it kind of maybe serves them to an extent, because change takes a bit of courage. It can be uncomfortable. And some people think that their strategy to life is, well, if I'm a bit of a BMW session, bitch, moan and whinge, I stay where I am. And, you know, and that's it. I don't have to take any ownership or responsibility for my life. So first of all, we just need to appreciate that is where some people are at. But some people are at that because of their upbringing and because of their conditioning and because they hang around other people who seem to confirm their worldview. So when you say, how can you help people? I guess one of the things that when organizations bring me in is they go, there's some people who are wearing the victim t-shirt, Paul, but it's really hard as the manager to tell them. But if you come in as an outsider, and also your ability to make people laugh can disarm them. And so I'm not saying if you want to change somebody, you've got to bring me in. But I'm just saying, first of all, stop and understand where people are at, and maybe there's a payoff to their behaviour. Secondly, you might want to have a bit of compassion about, isn't it sad that they feel that way? And then thirdly, realise that, I mean, there's a phrase I came across a few years ago, people change for two reasons. Either they feel the heat or they see the light. And for some people, feeling the heat is a pressurised situation where they think, I've got to do something here. Or they get something like they see the light, so to speak, where they get a bit of an aha moment. But again, it comes back to that self-awareness. It also comes back to the fact that some people don't want to have a look at any other side of the beach ball. They're very comfortable and very safe looking at their side of the beach ball and keeping it like that. So I'm throwing out some thoughts there, but I've got to be honest with you, there's not a magic wand answer. But if you did have someone, and it's not a book promotion for all the books, but of all the other books I've written, if you think about relationships, I've got two on relationship, one called S.U.M.O Your Relationships, and one called How to Succeed with People. How to Succeed with People is a more recent one. And if you had to choose which two to look at, I'd go for How to Succeed with People. One of the points in that is this: people can't be fixed, and we try and fix people, and we can support them and encourage them and challenge them. But ultimately, we can't fix people. You can fix a washing machine, you can't fix people.
That sounds, I think that's next on my reading list then, by the sounds of it. So
I think, can I just say, in terms of what you've just said there, Paul, I agree with some of it. I think, I must admit, I'm an internal optimist, I think. And I almost, I know you can't go around doing this, but it's almost like everybody needs a hug, that even the people who are the most miserable, negative-y sort of people, I always think there's something in them that actually, quite often people are just scared about change. They might, you know, I think sometimes if you really, really hate the world, you hate yourself. And sometimes it's about almost learning to feel comfortable with yourself. And one of the things that I did like about your S.U.M.O book was that actually all the messages in it are really, really memorable. They're really easy. They're really simple. You can, you know, they're just suddenly at the back of your mind. You can just pick them out when you want to. And so actually one of the phrases I've always used with our kids is choices and consequences, that whatever you do, whatever choice you make, there's a consequence to it. And I've got a 17-year-old who lacks any sort of emotional intelligence. So with him, I almost use this sort of algorithm type idea that, okay, so this is what you've got to do. You can go this way or this way. As soon as you go down one route, you start blocking off other options. And I think your event plus response equals outcome is a really good way, possibly with people who are in that sort of very negative, miserable mindset, to sort of use it, that, yeah, okay, you can do that. That's certainly that's the event and that's your response and that's the outcome you got. But it's almost to sort of help them see that, okay, well, just, you know, just think about it. What would happen if you just did something, even just tweak the smallest thing, if you just smiled at somebody in a street, if you just, whatever, like the smallest, tiniest thing, just to change your response, not in a big way so that they're not scared about it, but just stick a toe in the water and try it. Because I think people are scared, actually. Quite often it's not that they're happy there. I think quite a lot of people are in those very negative, miserable sort of mindsets, if you want. They're not happy, but they don't know how to do anything about it, and they're scared that they might expose themselves or make themselves more vulnerable. So I almost believe we all have a responsibility to help them in a way, to sort of try and encourage them to do something a bit different.
Again, it's all beach ball, and I think what you've said there is another sort of perspective on exactly what we're talking about, and I would definitely agree with it. Even though I've said some people are happy, I think they are on one level. Some people seem to be just, well, or accepting of where they're at. But I also agree with yourself that sometimes it is about, well, can I change? It is about, I'm scared. I talk about the fact that, you know, seeking support isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of wisdom, but people might feel exposed. And actually, in one of my other books, when I developed the beach ball a bit more, I actually talk about 4 questions to reflect on in terms of that other person and where they're at. And the first question is, you know, I wonder what's going on in their world at the moment that means that they are behaving the way that they are. And there are some negative, cynical people in life, but they've been hurt. I've once heard someone say cynic is an idealist who got hurt or who got scared about something. And another question to reflect on in relation to that and other people is, I wonder what's important to them at this time. And I think sometimes just being prepared to listen to them and have a coffee with them, and in a sense, your point, and was giving them, well, at the moment, a virtual hug. And one of the 7 questions in the Fruity Thinking chapter is, how can I influence or improve the situation? And going back to your point, sorry, I missed your name.
Libby.
Pardon?
Libby Hampson.
Yeah, Libby, your point about small steps, I think, again, is massively important, because nothing motivates like a bit of sense of success or progress. But if you make too big a change initially, people are scared by that and they might fail. When they see a little bit of progress and, oh, that was a bit easier than I thought, that was okay. And that's why that 4th question of the 7 questions, how can I influence or improve the situation? It's not saying, what do we need to do to have a massive goal to turn this round overnight? Because I don't think that's always realistic. So, yeah, I think we all need to, I think I would have used before, have a bit of compassion sometimes for where people are at. And sometimes that negativity is actually, it's almost a defense mechanism. It's almost like a mask. And maybe they are hurting or they're scared, but there's no way they're going to ask for support.
Mm.
I think as well, Paul, in terms of what you're saying about the beach ball, I think it's really important that when we're kind of making observations and maybe wanting to give someone some feedback, that actually that is our perspective, and that doesn't mean that it's right. And I loved some of the questions and the phrases that you've put in the book around what is it, something like, can I help shed some light on how I see the situation, you know, in terms of acknowledging that it's your observation, it's your perception, doesn't mean it's right, but you want to work with that person on it. Because I think we take a standpoint, don't we, sometimes, that I'm right, you're wrong, and that absolutely is unhelpful in terms of resolving anything or supporting somebody or, you know, coaching somebody. So I think it's really important that whenever we're sat opposite the table from someone who we perceive is negative, etc., that actually that's our observation. Doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's correct.
It's a great, Jenna, it's a great insight, really. I know when I talk, you know, I've got some other people talk about this phrase, you know, people who are mood hoovers, and I use the phrase sometimes, people who BMW, bitumen and whinge. But I guess beyond the catchphrases, if you like, we are talking about human beings. And I also think you're right in the sense that when you might say to them, look, this is how it's coming over to me. Can I shed some light on how I see things? Yeah. But I'd be interested in your opinion. I think you're being less, you're not being as direct and as confrontational. You're kind of like, help us explore this a bit more. It's like, again, the event I feel I'm observing is this behaviour, and I'd love to get to this kind of outcome. So just help me understand in some ways. And I think it is, going back to Libby's point, it's about maybe that sort of like that compassion and that trying to support people. But again, there are some people I've come across in life who it just seems like, no, I'm very happy with this t-shirt on, this victim t-shirt, and you know, don't patronise me, or what do you know? But I think most people, the majority, do actually want to change. There's something which I don't mention in the book, but it's a term which I come across from time to time, called the fundamental attribution error. Bit of a mouthful. And fundamental attribution error is when you make allowances for your behaviour, but when someone else behaves that way, you say, well, it's all about them and that's a bad part of their personality. So let me give an example. So there's the difference between character and context. So if you're driving at some stage in the future and you maybe drive past some cars who are queuing to get off the motorway, and then you cut in front of one of them, you're saying to yourself, yeah, but I only did that because I'm late for a meeting. So your behaviour is justified by the context. But if you're the one that's waiting patiently to get off the motorway and then someone else does it, it's like, what a jerk, how flipping selfish are they? And all of a sudden you attack their character. And yet when you do the same thing, you justify it by it was the context. And I think with negative people, maybe sometimes there's reasons for their negativity. And maybe they can break out of that negativity because it's not necessarily an inbuilt characteristic trait. Maybe it's the context they find themselves at the moment that have meant that they've started to feel more negative. So I'm glad you found that helpful, Jenna. I don't actually do a massive amount on beach ball in any real depth. And no one's pointed out about how useful those questions are before to maybe start to give some feedback. So I appreciate that because I might weave that more into some of my workshops.
I think because obviously I work in HR, I work with them, and so many times it's like the battle line is drawn when it comes to employee versus employer, manager versus employee, and peer versus peer, and the battle lines are drawn. And as soon as you start with observations, perceptions, constructive feedback, it's not always received in that way. So I think the way that those phrases are worded are helpful in terms of neutralizing that. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, great.
And I think, let's be honest, at the moment, you know, we're all having to engage with people, and I've heard the same ship analogy in terms of the roller coaster, is that my one bad day a week is not going to be the same as somebody else's. So we're all on this kind of roller coaster at different stages, and I think, you know, it's that ability to be able to appreciate that, isn't it? And I think it's it's and actually, just like you say, Jenna, I think sometimes I'm sure, I hope this is not just me, but I think sometimes we're guilty of kind of realizing that we almost form reality based on our perceptions, and we've got to remember it is our perception, it's not reality, and just almost take that step back a little bit. One thing I think Katie or somebody else might have had a question a minute ago, one thing I'd really love to know, and I think it's key, is that, you know, we all read hopefully a lot of books or listen to a lot of books, and I think sometimes it's, you know, when you're reading it, you're in it, aren't you? And you're like, right, this is fantastic. I'm going to make sure that I implement all of this immediately. You know, how do you maintain some of those learnings from S.U.M.O, Paul? Have you got any kind of tips for us now we've potentially finished the book, how we can ensure that we continue the learning and continue to implement some of the things that we've read about and at the time thought absolutely, but then as life happens, potentially forget about it?
I think it's always one of those challenges, isn't it? Is I've got some great ideas, and then the thing between knowledge and actually applying it. I suppose one of the things that fits well with S.U.M.O, hopefully you've all found, is the simplicity of all those kind of messages. And in some ways, how do you implement it? Well, I've come back to this phrase before, it's about self-awareness. So I think Libby mentioned about buying a couple of beach balls. One is just being mindful of the beach ball in every situation, in every way. It's not I've got to do something, it's just that sense of awareness. The 7 questions, I mean, I'm holding these up, and if you wanted to, if you're Jessica, you want to email the office, you can send you a link that you can send out to people. But the 7 questions, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is definitely important, be in 6 months' time, etc., etc. I know the amount of people, when they hear me speak, when I give out the postcards, will have them by their computer, on their office wall. I mean, some of them have them on their fridge as a bit of a reminder. So things like fruity thinking, the 7 questions are a reminder. The beach ball, I think it's like, I just need to have that awareness of it and remind myself of it. And yet have a little bit mini beach ball somewhere, and have some questions to reflect on just occasionally. I mean, one of the things I've become more, what have I done differently in lockdown is I am really good at taking notes when I've read books. And then I read another book and I take some more notes, and then another book and I take some more notes. What I've not been good at doing is reviewing and reflecting on what I've written previously. It's like the brain craves the new and the novel, and oh, this is good. And so at my ridiculously early hours of getting up in the morning, I've now, every day I'm filling this book, and I'm just typing, I'm just putting some stuff in, notes. But what I've started to do every morning is just take some time to just review 1 or 2 pages of those notes again that I wrote maybe 4 or 6 weeks ago, and some insights. And I found that it begins to embed the learning, because I think the natural tendency is, right, I finished S.U.M.O, which rightly say, now on to something else. And I think it's a question of going, okay, I finished S.U.M.O, but just like Emma has put all those little tabs in a book, maybe revisiting, reinforcing, reminding yourself, but also realizing with S.U.M.O, it ain't a complex book. Here's a little formula, E+R equals O. I mean, we're doing this in schools, remember the beach ball, develop a bit of fruity thinking, which question could help you? Hippo time is okay, maybe need to have a little bit of a wallow. So I think hopefully part of the success of the book is its simplicity, and also is its ease of accessibility and ability to use it. So I think that is in its favor. But again, if you were asking yourself, but how do I embed it? If you summarize some of your learnings in 2 or 3 pages, and you make a decision as part of your routine, whenever that is, of reflection, that you will reread some of the notes you took, not necessarily the book itself, but maybe some of the notes you took. Because for me, I think a lot of what I need now is not new material and new ideas. I need to remind myself of what I already know, or which I've actually forgotten. So Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of his habits is sharpen the saw. And I think we've got this nice shiny saw, and we know all about S.U.M.O, but the more, sometimes in life, you're sawing away at things. It's like, I think this needs sharpening up. It's a good refresher. So that would be some of my thoughts on how to keep the message alive from the book.
I think, Jessica, as well, the fact that you've done this, I think this is a really good way of keeping it alive. I've never, ever, well, actually, that's not true. I did join book club once, but I only made it to 1 meeting. But I'm not a natural, I don't know, I'm not a natural zoomer or talker on video chats or whatever. I really probably would rather hide away, if I'm honest. But the thing that I think was really good is that, having read the book, you were reading for a purpose, if that makes sense. So rather than just reading and it wafting in and out, you were reading for a purpose with that. So, and it was great, Emma, the way you kept sending reminders in terms of you've got 2 weeks left or whatever, because it almost felt that, oh my God, I've committed to this now. I'm going to have to read it, and I'm going to have to be prepared if anybody asks me a question to voice an opinion. And it's a bit like, for me, I know you mentioned Stephen Covey, but there's also somebody called Phil Race who does a lot of work about learning, and the deepest form of learning is apparently sort of like almost teaching back or learning back. So that idea for me, I suppose, of giving the beach ball to 2 people, I know the beach ball now will always be in my memory, as will that equation thing, because I've used that, I've explained that to a few people. So I think if all of us just said, okay, there's just going to be one message that I'm going to talk to somebody else about or use practically, that's there then, because you're living it. It's basically moved off the page and it's gone into your life or into your working practice. But I think even in a really, again, because I'm quite big on small steps, that even just logging onto this call for all of us, we've done something really proactively with the book and its message, and we're prepared to engage with it. And I think, for all of us on the call, actually all of us will take something away from S.U.M.O. And I think that would be great if we can keep the book club thing going, because if you've got to read something and join in with something, you are, by the very nature of having done that, you're doing something with it, you're keeping it alive.
I'm going to lie, I'm cheering you on what you've said there 100%, because I think I've come across this phrase, read it to teach it, which is part of the point that you made before. And it is that sense of always having that degree of accountability. And so many people will read a book, but almost from quite a passive point of view. But when you feel that there's a purpose, and I've got a chance to ask the author about something or share my comments, if you thought about if that happened to every book that you got a chance to read, it would have a dramatic difference on how much on how you read that book in the future. And I think I was once voted out of The Weakest Link with Anne Robinson many, many years ago. And the woman who voted me out said, and they went, well, why have you chosen Paul? Because I'd got the same number of votes as someone else to leave. And she had the final decision, this woman. And she said, well, I read a self-help book years ago, but it never worked. So I've always, and again, it's not the book. The book magic isn't in the book, is it? The magic is in what you do with the ideas in that book. And again, I go back to, I think it's staggeringly simple, the S.U.M.O message in many ways, or it's simple, but it's not always easy to apply because of challenges and stresses and times and everything, time pressures and everything else. But the stuff is simple. You haven't got to wrestle for hours, think, what the flipping heck does this really mean? And that's why, if we can teach it to kids in primary school and they get it, I don't see it as an insult when people say to me, don't take this the wrong way, Paul, but this is very simple. It's like, yeah, I've worked flipping years to make it like that.
Yeah, I think that's true, because my brother is an assistant head at a primary school, and I was talking to him about the book last week. And part of the plan for September is he has to do a whole new programme on is it PHSE now or whatever it is?
That's
personal,
right, yeah.
And I was saying, what have you got to work on? He said, I've got to work on how children are allowed to feel their emotions, but without absorbing their emotions. And I was like, right, well, I'm reading this thing at the minute. It's called Hippo Time. I said, I'm going to send you the book, because he lives up in Gateshead. And anyway, he's bought his own and he's read it, and he's absolutely devoured it, apparently. And he's building that into his plan for September.
Brilliant.
But what he found was that he's a bit like me. I don't read a lot of business books or development books or anything like that. I like a good story. Well, that's me. But that's why I liked reading S.U.M.O, because those interjections of your personal stuff and then making it a reality for us as well, it kind of it makes like a little team, doesn't it? You become a team with what you've put into the book, and then you try and relate it back to yourself. And that's what I guess
I've just always been naturally, I've just enjoyed telling stories. But there's so many people who've said exactly what you said to me, Emma, that people have said to me who've read then other books I've written where I still use stories, bring in my family. And when people say to me, I feel I know your wife. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and how are the kids doing? And someone said to me a while back, did you get your conservatory roof sorted? And there's like, well, that was a bit random, but I just find it easier. That's my genre, that's my style. I like to do the personal stuff, but I think we're all human, aren't we? Humans need humans. And we don't just want abstract ideas, we want examples. And we want not just everything being a success story. We like to hear when people have sometimes struggled, and boy, have I struggled with a few things, I really have.
I think we've got to be real, haven't we? And I think it's sharing that, it's being authentic, isn't it, first and foremost? But I think it's, it's not, we all know people that are kind of happy clappy all the time, and it feels forced. It doesn't feel real, and I think we can all be positive to us, and then actually they just become annoying. And I'm not going to be sorry to sound negative in any way, but because it's not real. Whereas actually I think there's a big part of going, do you know what, I'm having, like I say, I think I'm having a really bad day a week, I don't know what it is, and and I think it's just trying to enable people to relate to as well. Right, I'm conscious of time. Has anybody got, Nick, Karen, have you got anything that you want to add? Katie, have you got any questions or anything?
I'm really sorry. I've been very quiet because my little 2-year-old's in the background. My husband, I don't work on a Friday, but my husband's upstairs in the office, and he promised me he would give me this hour, and he hasn't. so Tilly's running around, so I have been quiet. I do apologise. I think, my takeaways from this from the book is about kind of that E plus R equals O, and it's about creating a bit of space rather than to react emotionally and respond rather than react. And I've experienced some challenges over the past 2 weeks around some business decisions, commercial decisions that could potentially have a huge impact on my business and my team. And I've been working with people I don't ordinarily work with. So this different perspective, and I'm a bit of a fixer, and we've had a problem over the past 2 weeks that we've come to a stalemate on several conference calls, and we just haven't been able to get past it. So I'm the eternal optimist, and I've got this desire to fix it, but I've had to kind of take a step back and think, and it's from that section in the book, and I asked myself some of those key questions around, well, how aware am I of myself in this, and what part am I playing in kind of influencing everybody else? And also then I don't know if this is a bit sad, a little exercise with the team involved. So one of my commercial director, he's actually he's got bowel cancer at the moment. So where's his head at? And he's been incredibly difficult in trying to come to a decision about things, but he's gone through a heck of a lot. So actually trying to understand and empathise where he might be at, and then some of the other, we're all in a different boat, as you've said. So kind of plotted all of that out. And then what I did is yesterday we had a call to kind of come up to a solution on this. And I just captured everybody's thoughts and perceptions about it and just put them up on the screen on some slides and said, can we just talk about this? Can we talk this through? And actually just giving people permission to talk about how they feel and the impact it might have on them and their team. It completely changed things. We still haven't come up with the solution, but I think it's brought us closer together. And yeah, that's really, really helpful.
And that, Katie, is all because you've obviously got the event, but it's how you've responded and how you've managed it that hasn't brought an outcome of a solution, but it's brought an outcome where you are now stronger and closer together. And again, just realizing, you know, the antidote to that victim thing is just saying, well, maybe there is something I can do. My behavior matters. What I say, what I do, the choices I make can make a difference here, rather than being fatalistic and going, there's nothing you can do. And that's a brilliant example. It really is.
Well, it's all down to your advice, so thank you.
Well, you're welcome, but it's also down to the fact you've done something with it, isn't it, as well? But I appreciate that. That's really encouraging. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, Paul, and everyone. I think just taking one or two things away from this talk today and seeing how I can implement that. And I love your thing about perspective. And I think for me, it's not making assumptions that I know what the other person is experiencing. So thinking about how I could use your questions. That's really been brilliant. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Karen.
Anybody else?
I'll just say I found this absolutely fascinating, Paul. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I'm going to fess up. I've got the book. I've not read all of it. I'm not at the beach ball bit yet, so I'm going to have to go tagged beach ball. So I need to read that. But the reason I haven't, well, one of the reasons I haven't read it, I'm trained as a lawyer, and as a lawyer, I trained as a mediator. And a lot of what you've been saying has resonated with mediation, to find out where other people are in their lives. All the disputes that they have isn't necessarily, in the business world, financial exchange of money. It might be just someone saying sorry, and it's probing to understand, as Katie just said, you know, what are the other people's concerns and problems. And it's not always, I want more money. It's, I just want an apology, or I just want you to do something else a different way. So a lot of that's resonated, and a lot of what I've read in the book up to now has resonated. I would have read more, but I voluntarily left my job 10 days before lockdown. So I've missed all of this grievance and chaos, if you like. For me, this is a sunny holiday. So I've just been out running and cycling.
Wonderful.
I've had my bad day this week, Tuesday, because it was a rest day. I didn't get to cycle, I didn't get to run. I had to rest. And I got to the end of Tuesday and I thought I've accomplished nothing, whereas my body was just resting. And Wednesday I went out and nailed it. So I'm looking forward to reading this.
Right.
Just to say thank you, basically.
Thank you. Thanks, and thanks for Jessica for making it all happen, and Emma as well.
I think, you know, honestly, thank you so much, Paul. And I know we've actually in the group, we set up a group WhatsApp. And there's a few people that were contributing quite a lot in the group WhatsApp, because Emma and I were putting things in terms of like, is anyone having a hippo day or those types of things. And, you know, there were quite a few people that were contributing quite a lot in the group that haven't made it to today. But, you know, I think it's, for me in this circumstances, that it doesn't matter where we are on the ship or on the roller coaster. It's that, as Libby said, coming together and in creating those communities. And that's one of the things that I really kind of hope comes out of this, is that we create these communities, that we get talking, that we share our experiences, good and bad, and we really kind of learn from it. And, you know, I think we're all at a different stage, but I know, you know, a month ago when we started this, you know, we were still kind of in the middle of lockdown, really, or it felt like it. And I think, you know, when I was saying, you know, the one thing that the Doris Day, which we haven't touched on today, was seizing the day, you know, and there's been lots of talk around, you know, recovery and green shoots and all of those things. And I think a month ago, everyone was it was too soon to talk about that. And some people might think it's too soon now, but, you know, reading that, and Emma, I'm sure will agree with me here, is that, you know, we've had some really challenging times in the last 10 weeks in lockdown, as Just Williams, as every business has. So I'm not pretending that it's all okay, but what we've done is we've really tried to seize the day, and we've really tried to do that. And, you know, looking at kind of that phrase that I want to leave you with in terms of, you know, I know lockdown feels like forever and it's endless at the moment, but one of Paul's comments was, don't count your days, make your days count. And I think that really resonated with, it feels like this is going on forever, but you know, sometimes it's great to have and achieve so much in the day, but also, like Nick says, and Katie's going to quote me on this later, I know, is sometimes it's okay not to, and I think it's giving yourself permission to do. But I think it's now, you know, we've read this book on, and some of us have, you know, have still got to read it, and we'll dip back into it and all of those things, but you know, pick it up, and we'll keep the group active. So if you want to kind of, you know, comment on it or ask questions or anything like that, then please do. But, you know, thank you so much to you all, and thank you to you, Paul. Honestly, it's absolutely fantastic to have you back with us.
Thank you.
And you see, everyone was very kind. You know,
you're pretty good, really.
You know,
I hoped you would be. And my final thought is, and I guess I'm almost after some help to some degree. I am mad passionate about the book that comes out on October the 1st. It's called Yes, Y-E-S-S, and it's the S.U.M.O secrets to becoming a positive, confident teenager. And I've invested a lot of time and energy into it. The illustrations, the illustrator has done some amazing illustrations. We'll raise some money for Young Minds, a mental health charity. So Jessica, I will flag that up nearer the time, because you'll be able to pre-order it. And I think it's probably going to be even for kids, maybe, although it's about for teenagers, maybe even a 9 or 10-year-old or an 11-year-old. You don't have to be officially 13 to read it. But a lot of the ideas in S.U.M.O I've tried to express through, you know, in a more fun, a fun, creative, very visual way. Because you think about the challenges young people are facing. So look at HIP, E plus Cycles O, beach ball. Sometimes they've rephrased in slightly different ways, but I think when we think about young people's mental health, I'm on a flipping mission with that book. So at some stage, I might just make contact with you, Jessica, and say, look, if there's anyone in your network so you think you just grab a copy and they think it's good, buy it for other people, or maybe a school will want to buy it for some of their pupils, because we want to raise money for charity. We want to make a difference to kids, really, as well. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Sounds awesome. I think I'll snap your hand off for a copy come October there, Paul. I've got a 13-year-old stepdaughter to be, that might benefit from that, shall we say.
Yeah, I've got a 13 and a 14-year-old stepsons as well, which will definitely benefit, and so will I, hopefully, as a result of it.
Yeah, it's not a magic wand. You don't just like put them in a corner and go, read that, and talk to him when you finish reading it.
That's how I parent, though. Is that not right?
Katie, I reckon Tilly will be all right for that. She's only 2, but I'm sure she'll be.
Yeah, she'll be fine. It's got lots of pictures in it.
Right, everybody, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and thank you so much to Paul for joining us again.
Thank you.
We'll keep in touch, but don't forget to order. Do you pronounce it yes?
Yeah, it's literally called Yes. YESSS, 3 S's.
Okay.
With the S.U.M.O secrets to being a positive, confident teenager.
Fabulous. We will send that out to everybody once we get them from Paul as well. But we'll be running another book club, guys. So we're going to start another one the week after next. Okay, so we'll keep you posted in regards to that, and hopefully we'll get Paul back again soon for one of his other books.
Brilliant.
All right, cheers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Paul. Much appreciated.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.